Now, Outa has written to the National Treasury on its proposal to exempt Eskom from disclosing irregular, fruitless and wasteful expenditure in the 2022-2023 financials. The non-profit civil action organization highlights the necessity to address root causes of irregular expenditure. Let's speak now to Outa CEO Duvenhage, who joins us to elaborate further. So the dust almost has settled, or at least the noise has died down at the moment, I suppose, which was Treasury's plan to say, okay, let's slow it down a little bit, open up this process, have people make submissions. How seriously, firstly, are they taking this process of people bringing in submissions?
Well, we hope they are taking it seriously. Otherwise, it would just be a box-ticking exercise, and we hope that they demonstrate that they have taken the input seriously, because I think a lot of people have worked hard to provide reasons as to why this is not a good idea.
Yeah. The prime, I suppose, environment here that they are trying to address is for the reporting regime to be equal for what they call market-facing government entities, so that they perform and compete at an equal level with other commercial entities. Do you understand that rationale?
No, I don't buy that at all. I mean, Eskom has been a monolith and a monopoly for so long now. There's no competition out there really. It's providing the vast majority. It's not like up until now it's very expensive, especially for people who can't afford it, to have to go and convert to alternative energy sources. So Eskom is still the provider for the mass majority of the public. So that's not the case. And so they shouldn't be making these excuses to say, well, we need to compete. I think what is wrong with this plan of theirs is that the law is very clear. There's a Public Finance Management Act that they need to adhere to, because if they don't, then they do start to hide information which is very important to the public, is very important to the auditors, to be able to check whether there is fruitless and wasteful expenditure and breaking the rules through irregular expenditure. And we can't have them now saying that, look, we don't think it's right to, or it's good for us to be able to provide that information. That's just a futile exercise. And as we've always said, transparency is the enemy of corruption. And if government thinks they want to reduce transparency, well, we know where that leads to. We've seen the corruption that continues to pervade Eskom.
So how do you make that argument in the context of saying, well, we'll still have them reporting on fruitless and wasteful expenditure, but in the financial report, not in the financial statements?
Well, yeah, they say they're going to put it into the integrated financial or the annual report, but those reports are not audited. It is the annual financial statements that are audited, and that's where you have the scrutiny and the oversight of the Auditor General's office and organizations like Outa and others. It's when you start to put that information into unaudited documents like the annual reports, you cannot trust that that information is correct because it's not audited. So, I guess our question to Eskom and if you just look at the reasons they provide, they all pertain to inadequate systems of internal controls and incidents that were previously logged are not there anymore. They can't be tested. Well, that's a sign of an organization that doesn't have its house in order, its financial hygiene in order. And what the minister should be doing and the shareholders and Treasury should be saying to Eskom is, get your house in order. Don't ask us to provide you with excuses why you shouldn't have to disclose this information. You are in the mess you're in right now, Eskom, because of the weak oversight and the weak application of internal controls. So fix those rather than ask for the excuses, because otherwise it's just going to get worse.
Yeah. So, as you put it, lack of controls at Eskom cannot be reduced by regularizing fruitless expenditure.
Exactly. You need a report on it. You need to be aware that you are going to be under scrutiny if you don't bring this under control. This is your role as management. This is your role as leadership in that organization. You're paid a lot of money to do this job, and do it properly. And don't ask for these excuses to hide that information. We need to see it. And we need to start holding people accountable for that information. If it starts getting worse, you've got to watch the trends. And I also don't think these excuses that they give that, well, this puts us on an even playing field against the private sector. If they think that the ratings agencies and the lending houses are going to be fooled by the fact that the information is not there and therefore this organization with its qualified audits is all in good shape, that's not going to be the case. They're not fools. So really, just let's get back to basics and exercise good financial hygiene.
So, where we sit now, Treasury has said part of what needs to happen is Eskom must write off municipal debt, or at least a portion thereof, but they will be getting no cent, and they must go out into the market and raise money for at least operational generational issues as well as the transmission grid. Is Eskom in a position to do that?
Well, they're going to find it very difficult. I think, again, if they start getting on top of the controls that they need to have in place, if they start reducing the theft of coal and the incidents that are causing the breakdowns, and they start selling more electricity, they'll start getting more revenue. They can become profitable. It's going to take some time. Obviously, with the socializing of some of that debt through Treasury taking over a lot of that debt, I think they can be on the road to recovery, but they're not going to be going down that road unless they fix a lot of the internal problems. With regards to writing off municipal debt, I think we've done this a number of times before, and the problem is there's no plan to start the payment of that debt or future debt that will arise unless they put those municipalities under stringent requirements to pay their bills going forward if they're going to write it off going backwards. And I think every time they write off debt, they don't go in there with a plan with the municipalities to say, from here on, this is how we're going to do it. If you don't pay 1 month, we have to cut off. And writing off debt is a big decision, but you can't write it off this year and write it off next year and write it off the year after. They need to put plans in place to make sure that people start paying for their electricity use. And yes, you're not going to collect debt where it's not uncollectible. The debt is just too high in some of those towns. They'll never get it. But write it off with a plan and an agreement. And we don't see that implementation plan put in place.
Yeah. And how do you see this entity continuing to make money? Because, as we speak now, a lot of their major customers are either building their own solar plants and they'll be pretty much off the grid, and except for the rental that they say you continue to pay for being connected to the Eskom network, but they will not be making as much of that money coming up from there, unless they are making that money off tariff, which they need to increase quite significantly for the residential consumers. How else will they be making money?
They're not going to. Eskom is in a death spiral, and it's a self-inflicted one. It's all inflicted by bad governance and bad government. As you say, you can't keep pushing these prices up over 20% year on year and expect people to continuously pay. They're going to find alternatives. Sadly, it is the poorest of the poor who can't find the alternatives, who are going to be sitting and paying these higher prices. And businesses and people who can afford it are going off-grid. Where they can, they'll even be going and not paying the network fees if they go off-grid 100%, which is a costly exercise. But the world is moving that way fast for Eskom's in the Eskom world here in South Africa. And you think back to the bad decisions that were made in Brian Malefe's days when you had coal that was tied, coal mines tied to those power plants, and they decided to sell those off and give them to others to make the money with statements like, we don't want to own the bakery, we just want to buy the bread. Well, if you eat all the bread that comes from the bakery, you best own the bakery. And so they made some really silly decisions. And now Eskom is buying coal at excessive prices. A lot of it's being stolen. There are coal mafias and collusion and corruption taking place to this day that is crippling Eskom. So it's going to die in the long run because society will not need Eskom's power. There will be private generation and own generation. That will be the order of the day in the next decade.
Interesting that you bring up that question of electricity mafias. The Democratic Alliance revealing to us this week that they sent a question to the president. Will you be investigating the ministers, cabinet ministers, who are supposedly involved with the mafias there that are crippling Eskom? He says, no, I'm not going to do that. What is Outa's view on that?
Yeah, of course he won't. You saw in Parliament one political party, just one party, voted against it. Every other party voted for an investigation, a forensic investigation to take place. This is abuse of power by the ruling party, but it doesn't matter because you can't hide the truth. There are other forensic investigations and audits that are underway and taking place. The information will out, and the people that are involved will be held accountable. It's just going to take a matter of time. And hopefully there's going to be significant political change in the next 18 months to be able to start turning that ship and starting to hold people accountable. So while the ruling party's in power, it doesn't suit them to start uncovering who's behind the corruption. We know that this party has fed off many avenues and revenue streams that have been corrupt for many, many years now. And that's not going to stop for the next year or so. In fact, it's getting worse. So they're not going to want to go down that road of investigating themselves.
From one disclosure to another, let's talk about something else that has been quite interesting, and we have been talking about it earlier on today. And I know yourselves have also, as Outa, looked into this question. What is the value of South African Airways? How much is that asset really worth? Because the outgoing DG, who's currently suspended, says the Takatso Consortium, at least by his conservative numbers, have undervalued that asset by 7 billion. And that is him being conservative and not adding, for example, the international property, the routes, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, look, this is why it's very important to have those financial statements, which have been missing for so long. There hasn't been enough transparency. We know there's been political interference and meddling in SAA for far too long. It's been bailed out. But what is the true value now? I think what we need is an investigation or an independent report on what the true value is of SAA, so that this deal can happen transparently. And I hope the new board, the interim board, is there to do that and make sure that they're going to have to answer the questions for many years to come as the value of SAA does start to materialize, the true value, and the private equity partners take over the control of managing this airline. Look, we've always said that government should get out of the business of business, especially complex and competitive businesses like airlines and armaments manufacturing, like Denel and many others. They cannot compete. They're too lethargic. They are not agile enough to compete in the private sector, with the private sector. So it's good that there is a majority, a private equity shareholder coming on board. As we've seen Telkom. Telkom would have died a death so many years ago had private equity players not come on board and saved, and even now it's still struggling. So I guess we'll have to see what that value is, and hopefully the new board make sure that there's strong oversight and that this deal is the best one for the country.
Wayne Duvenhage, appreciate your time. Thank you very much for coming on. That is Organization and Doing Tax Abuse CEO there, Wayne Duvenhage.